Okay, welcome everybody. I hope everybody got on okay and can hear me. If there are any concerns with being able to hear me, please raise your hand or let me know. Again, thank you all for coming. We are going to start off the meeting with just going over a few ground rules regarding Zoom etiquette, how to use certain features on the Zoom so that we can make sure that we are getting to everybody's questions and addressing any concerns that anybody has. So currently, right now, I have everybody muted. This is just to be able to make sure that we don't have any interference. Somebody's phone rings, the dog barks, can interfere with people talking. So currently, like I said, everybody is muted. Now, when it is going to be your turn to speak, there's a few different ways that we can go about that. The first way is you can use the hand raising feature within the software. And if you are on a laptop, if you take your mouse and kind of hover it over the screen, you should be able to see this feature down at the bottom. It says reactions. It has like a little smiley face with a plus sign. If you click on that, there's a little feature that says raise hand. And if you click that, it's going to put this little hand at the top of the screen. And then I'm going to know that you're going to want to ask a question. And then once I go ahead, I'll let you know it's your turn. You can unmute yourself, and then I'll remove the hand so that we know that your question has already been asked. The way to unmute yourself is also by taking your mouse and hovering over the screen. On the bottom left-hand corner, you're going to see something. As of right now, since you're all muted, it's a little microphone that has a red line through it. You can just click that and it'll unmute you, so then you'd be able to talk. But again, we're going to keep everybody muted for the time being, just so we don't have any interference. I do have the ability to mute you, so if you accidentally unmute yourself, I will be going back in and muting you. If you are on an iPad, it's a little different. So you can click on the screen, and in the top right-hand corner, you should see something that says more, and under there should be your hand raising feature. Also, if you tap, you should be able to see the mute and unmute. Now, if you do want to join us on video tonight, again, that is 100% not necessary. You can also take your mouse and hover over the screen, and you're also going to see, if your video is currently not on, you're going to see a little video camera in the bottom left-hand corner next to that microphone that has a red slash through it. You click that and you turn your video on. But again, don't worry about it if you don't want to. Obviously, there are a lot of people on this call. We want to try and accomplish as many questions as we can tonight and get as many things answered for everybody. We do want to make sure that we are keeping the questions directly related to the budget and the letter that went out, with the reserve study and the budget. Anything beyond that, if you have any questions or concerns about anything else, you can direct that to Mercantile or myself at a later date, and we can discuss those off this meeting. Because again, we just want to kind of keep it directly to the reserve study and questions about the budget. If at any point it seems like we're not being able to come to a resolution on a question that's being answered, I might go ahead and just ask that we continue the conversation off of the meeting, just that we can continue the meeting going and we're not keeping everybody tied up on certain things. We can certainly discuss it at a later date or send a correspondence out to the community with a solution or resolution as necessary. Obviously, to keep it, we're going to have one person speak at a time. So again, we're going to make sure that everybody is muted. Okay. So that being said, I am going to call the meeting. Well, we're going to ask to call the meeting to order. But first, I think everybody knows me, but if not, I am Alex. I'm the property manager for Horton Estates. So if you call Mercantile or get an email from me, I'm the person that manages the day-to-day of the community. We do have some other staff in our office that handle the accounting for your property as well as the maintenance, but I handle the day-to-day. We also have our trustees here with us. I believe we're going to go over to them now. All right. So Kevin is the president. We also have Manny here with us. Totally blanked out. And then over to the right, we have Judy here with us as well. And then if we zoom all the way over to the left, we have Ryan. Ryan is the president of Mercantile Property Management, so he can introduce. Do you want to introduce yourself, or do you want me to introduce myself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight.
Hold on one second. We do have another board member with us. They are currently on the Zoom call. So Bill is on the Zoom call with us. He's raising his hand. I don't know if you can see him. He's not here with us in the clubhouse, but certainly board member here with us. And then we also have some volunteers here with us as well. I see Ralph is here on the call. And then here in the clubhouse, we do have Howie that is here with us. He helps us with the water division. And then we have Thisha as well that is here with us. So again, just a reminder, the reason we're meeting tonight is to answer questions regarding the letter that went out for the reserve study and the budget. So again, we'll just keep those questions there. I know that you did all receive the budget in an email and it is posted to the portal. The budget has been mailed. I've been told that it hasn't actually made it to your door yet. So I apologize. Unfortunately, I wish I could control the post office once we mail things, but I can't. So hopefully you'll be getting that relatively soon, but again, you should have received it in your email as well as it is available on the portal for use. All right. Sure. So before we get started about the questions regarding the budget and the reserve study, one of the things that I did want to do is I'm going to share my screen. So you'll be able to see my screen and I'm going to walk you through the portal. Recently, we did have a portal update, so things are a little more user-friendly for the homeowners to use, and I want you to be able to see the features that you do have available to you. So if you're looking for a document that's on the portal, you can very easily find it there. You can review your account balance on there. You can sign up for ACH forms there and a few other various things. But more importantly, you're going to find the financials that are posted there, as well as meeting minutes, your governing documents, rules and regulations, the budget that was posted, the reserve study, and the reserve study revision tables that are also there that we're going to discuss a little bit tonight as well too. So if you give me a second, I'm just going to share my screen.
Did you start recording?
Yeah. Log in here. All right, everybody should be able to see my screen here now. So this is our portal. So once you log in, and everybody should have their username and password. If you don't, please feel free to call our office and we can get that to you so you can utilize this feature as well. On the left-hand side now, we have this great feature that is very easy. You have different areas that you can click on. So you have your account detail, which is where you're going to bring up all of your charges, payments that are made, and all of your billing. So you can see directly on there when we bill something, how much it is, when we receive a check from you, or when your ACH is pulled. So you can see all of that information there, which is a great feature. So if you're ever questioning, hey, did they get my check yet? Or how much did I pay on my water last quarter? I can't find the bill. You can go on and view your account details to be able to see that. Over here on the left-hand side, there's this documents area. So you are going to be able to, this is where you're going to be able to view those documents I was talking about. So here you can see the annual meeting information. So we have the nomination packet and the annual meeting packet. So while we mail it out and we email it out, you're also able to view it on our portal here as well. Your budget, so you're going to see 2020 budget, 2021, 2022. So if you got the new budget this year and you said, hey, what was the budget last year? What was that line item? I don't remember. You're more than welcome to view the past budgets as well on the portal. Your documents, so a lot of times if you're looking for a refinance or going through anything with the bank, they request a copy of your documents. You're able to view them here as well as download them so you can provide them. Or if you're just looking for,
what the heck it's saying?
You can go ahead and take a look at that as well too and download. Also financials. So you're going to see all the financials here starting from June 2020 all the way to December 2021. So again, you can view and download all of the financials as well there. Forms, we have an owner information form. So when a new owner comes into the community, we ask them to fill out a form just with their name, emergency contact information, and send it back to Mercantile. So we have communication, your email, your phone number. So if you ever need to update that information for any reason, you can find that owner information form is there as well, and you can send it in to us. We also have our auto pay form on there. So if you decide that you would like to have your condo fee automatically taken out of your account each month, you can fill out that form and send it in to us, and we'll be able to set you up for ACH payments. You don't have to worry about sending in the check every month. Insurance, you're going to have your master insurance information. So if you, for any reason, need a copy of what the condominium master policy covers, you're going to see that there, as well as information on who to contact the insurance company if you need additional information. And then you're also going to see a few more things. You're going to see the minutes as well. So you can always review those also, so you can see what's going on within the community. And then letters that we send out. So the annual inspection letter that we sent out, you would see that there as well too. And you're also going to find the reserve study. So this is new that we just recently posted a few days ago. So you'll see the finalized reserve study that was actually given to us by the engineer. You're going to see the table of revisions that the Board of Trustees worked diligently to go through the reserve study and make some revisions to specific for your community and what they felt they could make changes to. And then also a spreadsheet that shows exactly what those changes were, so you don't have to go through and try and figure out yourself. And then down at the bottom, you'll see like the new owner welcome information. So all the information you would typically receive if you were a new owner. So that's what we have under documents, but a lot of useful information. So if you need something right away, and you can certainly pop on there and see if you can get that. Let's see. We have links on here as well too. So links include your HomeWise docs. So if you are looking to sell, we go through a third party that's called HomeWise Docs, and that's where you're going to order your 6D for your sale, any information you need regarding insurance, any information you need as a condo questionnaire, if you're doing a refinance, all of that can be done through there, and the link is right in your portal. There's another link here for pay lease. So if you wanted to make a payment online for your water payment or your quarterly water fee or your snow bill, you can go and do that through pay lease. Depending on how you pay, there is a charge. It's not through us, it's through the third party. So you would have to determine, not sure how that's determined. So you would see that on the actual website. And then there's also the information for your certificate of insurance request if you needed that as well too. And then lastly, we have forms. So if you do have a work order request that's needed, you can go over to forms and you can click on it, and you can hit the email and it will open up exactly the, like almost like an email, and it'll have your name, your information, so we know where it's coming from. You can add documents to it, including images if you needed to as well too. So a lot of great features on the portal that you can use. And if you do have any questions or concerns, you can certainly call us as well too. And we can certainly bring you through the portal and show you how to work it. And then lastly, I know there's a way, Ryan, maybe you can help me. There is a way that you can change your information on here too, if you want to change your phone number. Trying to find out where it is. You can change your phone number, your last name, your first name, and I don't exactly know how to do that, but I'll have to find out, and I can certainly get back to everybody on that. But again, a lot of great information on the portal. Is there anything else you wanted me to discuss, Kevin?
Well, your username is your account number. So if you don't have that, if the residents don't have that, they can contact you and you can give it to them.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, if you don't have your user login and password, your username is your account number, but you might not have your password. We sent everybody out their username and password when we took on as property management, but you might not have it anymore. Feel free to call the office and just explain to customer service that you're looking to use your portal, and they'll be able to generate a portal letter, which will have the link to your portal, your username, and your password to be able to go on there and take a look at it. Perfect. All right, I think we are going to go over to Manny now, and we can discuss some of the reserve study.
Good evening.
Hold-
This evening, we are going.
One second.
Sorry. Too soon?
You should be good now.
Okay, yeah, good evening. This evening, we're going to discuss two important topics that Alex has already touched on: the Horton Estates Reserve Fund and the 2022-2023 budget. I just want to go over a few things regarding our reserves. While the budget that we will be discussing covers expenses we expect to incur in the next 12 months, our reserves act as protection for large unexpected expenditures. For example, if during the next year we need to replace one of our large water tanks because it developed a leak that was beyond repair, or if we need to establish new drainage fields for our septic system due to inability of the existing fields to handle flow through them, or if we have to replace, for example, our 40 horsepower fire suppression pump because it failed, we would have to turn to the money that we have put aside in reserves to pay for the expense. Keep in mind that if this money was not available, we would have to assess individual homeowners in order to come up with the funds to pay for the repairs. Alternatively, we could take out a loan to pay for the expense, for which monthly payments with interest would have to be paid by increasing the monthly condo fees. For some time, concerns have been raised by some in the community over the fact that our reserves may be insufficient to meet an unexpected major capital expenditure because we have not saved enough for the future. In addition, Mercantile Property Management, who have a significant amount of experience with other condominium complexes in Massachusetts, advises that our reserves may be inadequate. As the letter that you all received goes on to explain, we obtained the services of a professional firm, reserve advisors, to evaluate the situation here at Horton Estates, and their conclusion was that for certain our reserves are not adequate and must be increased. When the report of the study was received, we requested the assistance of two former experienced trustees as well as Mercantile Property Management to assist us in analyzing the report, make changes we felt were needed, and help us implement the recommendations. Ryan from Mercantile Property Management will now talk a little more about reserve studies, so I'll turn the meeting over to him. And following that, Alex will go over the 2022-2023 budget that we have put together. So, Ryan?
Perfect. So, yes, I mean, good and bad as far as reserve studies go. The question always becomes is, why do we have reserves? And, some say, if it's a new product, then we shouldn't have to save today. Others say, why am I paying for somebody to replace something in the future? But you never know when the life expectancy of an existing asset or amenity at the community is going to fail. And what happens more often than not is people are caught off guard. And as Manny mentioned, is by having those funds available, you avoid a special assessment. Now, special assessments can be not only a financial burden to an individual, depending upon where you're at in your life. You could have come across some financial difficulties. You could have had to invest or help a family member or a sibling or a child with some situations in their life. And all of a sudden, this unneeded assessment comes along and you have to now contemplate, how do I pay for that? And by putting adequate reserves aside, you're able to avoid that. The other aspect of it is special assessments under the Massachusetts condo lien are not protected under the super lien. So when there's a unit that goes into foreclosure, and if there's a special assessment assigned and assessed to that unit and they're unable to pay it, it may not be collectible in the super lien. So by avoiding that potential risk and putting adequate funds along and aside in the reserves, you're able to protect the association and protect each and every owner. Now, when you look at it from an individual standpoint, you might say, I'm not worried about it. I'm fine. I'll have plenty. But you can't look at it when you're in a condominium that way. You have to look at it as what is for the greater good of the community. The other aspect is what's fair. Someone was living here prior to you for 5, 10, 15 years, and they were using those specific items in the community, whether it's water treatment or whether it's fire suppression, and they should pay just as you should pay for the usage of it for the time frame of what you're here. So it's fair to you when you purchase in and you live here as an owner, you've contributed for your usage, and so on for the people in the future and past residents as well. So, this question comes up a lot. What is adequate reserves? Well, FHA a number of years back said, if we're going to give out federally backed mortgages, we're going to say that you need to adequately fund reserves. So they made the statement that you have to contribute 10% of your reserves annually. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't a great description beyond that, other than in the IRS ruling, it says you have to have adequately and sufficiently fund your reserves. Once again, what is adequate and what is sufficient? So one could guess at the items, but guessing isn't really the board's fiduciary obligation to the unit owners. So what we have to do is go out and get these reserve studies done. The reserve study comes back and they set a baseline. They look at the components, as you've seen in the reserve study report, that you have, the life expectancy, the existing age of them, the estimated cost to replace those items, how much you need to put and contribute annually into your reserves to have those funds available, and then factor in slight inflation factors to know, okay, if it's replaced in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, what's the best way to do it? Unfortunately, for many condos in the 80s, when originally developed and the big first boom was happening, not that they weren't being built in the 70s as well, but many communities looked at it and said, but it's brand new, I don't need to think about replacing it. And what's happened is 30, 40 years later, those items are now failing. And communities are looking at it and saying, I have to come up with 5, 10, 15 million. Now, it's certainly different in your community based on the figures that you need, but it's still a reality that if you wait too long, the time period of which you need to collect those funds becomes shorter and shorter, and the financial burden and the hardship becomes larger and larger. So by saving those funds today, you're protecting the association, you're strengthening the association financially, and you're increasing values ultimately of the community. If I was an owner and I took a look at your budget and I wanted to see, okay, when was the community developed? What might come up for replacement? Do they have a reserve study? Were they planning for the future? What's set aside for the reserves? I'm going to be more inclined to purchase in a community that has a healthier reserve because of two things. One is my bank's going to probably give me a better rate or be more inclined to give me, a larger amount or better terms because they know that there's a less likelihood of an assessment that would put me in a financial hardship. Also, that's an investment that I'm buying into, and it's funds set aside that I'm happy to contribute to. So reserves they impact not only the individual aspect of replacement and upkeep, but a whole variety of things. So when you really take a step back and look at that and say, my contribution on an annual basis, is X dollars, but it's for the usage of that asset when I need it, it really is beneficial to you. And you'll find yourself that if you think, hey, don't worry, I'm going to sell in 5 years or 6 years, I don't have to worry about it. You might not sell in 5 or 6 years. Things change in life. So don't find yourself in a position where you say, we don't want to contribute to it. Take the approach now where you say, we're going to strengthen ourselves as a community. We're going to build our financial assets. We're going to have a healthy reserve. We're going to do it over time, and we're going to be ready for the unknown. And that's really the key to reserves. And it's, for every community, a huge thing to really take a look at. And ever since, unfortunately, the catastrophe in Florida, where the building collapsed and there was insufficient reserves and boards were faced with difficult decisions to either try to kick the can down the road, turn a blind eye, whatever it may be, because they were in such a financial hardship, that jeopardized the safety of residents. And the last thing you want is a fire suppression pump or something to be neglected because you don't want to have to go to an assessment. So it protects everybody overall in many different ways. And the healthier the reserve, like I said, we're advocates for it. I think you're going to find that any condominium you speak with now, mortgage companies, financial institutions, everybody is pushing having these reserve studies done so that we know what is the baseline, what is adequate and sufficient funding, and how do we accomplish that. And your board has taken the right step in that direction and now is able to put together a plan over the next 30 years to accomplish that goal. So I don't know if I can certainly answer additional questions after. I don't know if that kind of wrapped it up, summed it up a little bit. Oh, good.
So thank you very much, Ryan. And we will certainly take questions. We are just going to save them a little further. I'm going to go over the budget and then we'll go ahead and open up the floor to questions. So if you do have any questions and you're afraid you're going to forget them, just jot them down and then we can get to those questions right after the budget. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again so you all can see the budget and exactly what I'm speaking about here. Give me 1 second. All right, So like I mentioned, you should have received your budget packet in your email as well as being available on the portal. So we sent out the annual budget, which had the initial letter from the trustees explaining the budget changes, increases, as well as some of the reserve study items on here. And then it also explained the footnotes and the budget. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm primarily going to go over things that had large changes within the budget. And I'll go over the explanation of those. And then if you do have questions about other items within the budget, you can certainly ask those questions, but just going to really focus on the things that had large changes from last year to this year. So the first thing I am going to touch on is professional fees. So you'll notice that the professional fees did increase significantly from last year of about $350 to this year of about $3,000. The reason for that is in Massachusetts, you are required to have a review done if you have more than 50 units. And that is a review at the end of the year of the books. So Mercantile takes care of the books throughout the year, and then a CPA firm would go through and review and make sure there's no changes that need to be made. Previously, there wasn't a full review being done, so we have gone ahead and made sure that we're going to be working with the CPA firm, which we're in the works of speaking to a few different ones to pick a CPA firm, but to review the books. So this coming year, the end of this month, those books will be reviewed by a CPA firm. Unfortunately, it costs a little more than $350, so we did have to increase the fees in order to accommodate that. But again, it is a Massachusetts state requirement, so we want to make sure that we are following that. Another increase that we did have this year, not a large increase, but landscape service did go up. We were in contact with the landscaper prior to us developing the budget to ask them, is there going to be an increase in fees this year? We do certainly see an increase kind of across the board in all different areas right now with COVID and cost increases on certain materials. So there was about a 4% increase that we're anticipating for the landscaping. So you'll see the difference from last year's numbers to this year's numbers. And then additionally, one of the other large items that changed in this year's budget is if you look under the reserve deposits area, you're going to see the first line item, which is reserve deposit. Now, this is your reserve deposit that is strictly for condominium replacements. So if we have to do shingles on the clubhouse or anything related to the roads or the common drainage or anything that is the association's responsibility on the condo side, that is your contribution to that. We added another line item, and it's the reserve deposit for the water department. We had gotten clarification from an attorney that the reserve deposits for the water really should be calculated based on your percentage of ownership. In order to do that in the most effective way, we decided to move the reserve deposits for the water division into the operating budget. So it's easier for us to break out the reserve deposit by your percentage of ownership. So you're no longer going to see the reserve deposit line item on your water budget. It's going to be on your operating budget. And we will explain a little more about that, or if you have any questions about that, we can go over that as well. As far as your water budget this year, we really didn't have many changes. Again, the only large change that we had on the water budget is going to be that it no longer has the reserve deposit line item on your water budget. It now has the water reserves on your operating budget. Overall, with the reserves as well too, you're going to see that there was a little bit of an increase from last year in the water reserves as well as the operating reserves, and that is directly reflected based on the reserve study that the board had and how much funding we need to move forward to make sure we are adequately funded for those special projects that are going to be coming up within the next years. All right, I think at this time we can go ahead and open it up to specific questions that somebody might have about the reserve study or the budget. So again, I'll just remind you all that if you did want to speak, you can use the hand raise feature so that we can go ahead and make sure that we get to everybody's questions accordingly. So I will open up the floor for that now. All right. I see Bob Adams here. So Bob, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
How do I do that? I have three questions that I wanted to put forth. But before I do, I just wanted to preface it a little bit and just thank the trustees and former trustees, committee members that participated and certainly Mercantile in helping to pull the budget together. Basically, I think the letter was a great job of trying to describe some of the challenges that we were having or would be having this coming year. So I want to thank you very much for that. And also the high level financial overview. Again, it was very, very high level. And I'll talk to that a little bit further on. Basically, this time last year, when we provided the 21-22 fiscal budget, expense budget, we did it very much like we're doing this time around. This past year's actual expenditures, along with the forecasted February expenditures for this year, are now available, but we don't find them in the financial package. Generally, one needs to understand our current expenses for the current year, which is due to end in about 3 weeks' time, so that you can better understand what the new expenses are going to be for the upcoming year. So just kind of an observation or a comment that I wanted to share. So personally, and I can't speak for everyone, but personally, in terms of the budget, I would very much like to see, and I think this is the opportunity to do that as part of the budget cycle, is to have a chance to see how we performed this current year for our budget, where we under, where we over, and where we significantly over. And if so, what was the variance? How much dollars were we over or under? And what percent variance does that represent? At the same time, and I'll talk to that a little bit further later on. But basically, well, I personally, I have full confidence in the trustees. I have full confidence that the numbers that we're seeing in the package are correct. There's no question about that in my mind. I think my question to the group is that I personally, and I think some of the residents also, would like to see more information so we can better understand the budget. Right now in the package, we have, for every line item, we have one number. One number all by itself doesn't have a lot of meaning other than the fact that it might be smaller or it might be big. You have no way of looking at that and relating that to what happened in our current year, which will be coming up to an end very shortly, as I mentioned, within 3 weeks. So just wanted to kind of make those points. But moving on to my three questions with that as a preface, I'd like to ask the team if we did meet our budget goals for the 21-22 year that we're wrapping up, or if we do, or did we go over budget, under budget, and if so, by how much?
Do you want me to speak?
I will say that the information we have currently is available through the end of
December.
December. All of that information is available to you.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Oh, you
Go
can't?
ahead, sorry, I had to switch the speaker back.
She wouldn't let me speak. No, we had all the information that we have available to us is through the end of December. And that is available up on the portal. So if you do look at that, you will see the financials. We do not have it yet for January. They're due in another couple of weeks.
You should have them, they just came through from.
Okay, we
so I'll
have
send
not
to you.
received them or reviewed them, but we certainly have the ones through December. And they do track year-to-date expenditures and how we're doing against the budget. So that information is available if you go out and look in that area on the portal. You want to say something, Alex?
Sure.
Yeah, what I'd like to add to that, I appreciate that, and I'll definitely take a look at the portal. I have 15 years of experience putting extremely large budgets together and presenting them this time of year, or rather in the October-November timeframe, not only reviewing the budgets for the current year, but also for fiscal year starting January 1st. And what most companies, if not all companies, do certainly is they take the actuals that are available to them. In the case that you mentioned, we have 10 months worth of actuals. in order to, what most companies do is they identify what the forecast is for the remaining 2-month period. And that combined becomes a budget forecast for the current year. Armed with that, one can then take that and compare that to that's an aid in helping you build your budget for the coming year, despite the fact that you don't have actuals for the last month or the last 2 months of the years that you had mentioned. That's perfectly understandable. But to get around that, most companies will come up with a forecast for those figures where they don't have actuals for. Without that information, it's extremely difficult then to put together a 12-month plan if you're working with 10 or 11 months worth of data. So you need to forecast to come up with that number. Once you have that number, you're in a position to do what is called a variance analysis. And that variance analysis takes the high-level document that you provided, which I thought was excellent, but it takes it just one level further and really no deeper than this. It basically takes, I just lost everybody, I think, there we go. It basically takes, two numbers and it puts 2 columns on the spreadsheet. So you can do a variance. You can go up with variance in dollars. You can go up with the variance percent. And to the right of that, the variance analysis typically will show for anything greater than an agreed to amount, let's say 5%. If you have a variance of 5% or more, it deserves and requires a variance analysis to the right of that in terms of a comment. So armed with that, and granted, it's not an actual for the entire 12-month period. It includes a bit of a forecast there. But nonetheless, one is able to then look at the current year budget, know where we stand relative to budget versus actual or budget versus forecast. Number one. Number two, that same number, that same column can then be used to compare against the new budget. And one will have the opportunity at that point to not only see how we performed in the current year, albeit a forecast or a very accurate forecast, but one can also then see how that would compare to the new budget forthcoming. Are we increasing by 10%, 5%, 16%, what have you? And using a variance analysis approach, any resident can simply scan that.
So Bob, I don't want to interrupt you. I think I just want to answer your question for you, because I think you're just really asking about how the budget process is, and what you're explaining is exactly what we do. We just don't necessarily give that information to the homeowners. It's not to say that it can't be given. It's a board decision if they would like in the budget packet to send out what the projected year end is going to be, and then on another column what the new budget is going to be, so the homeowners can see that. But we absolutely do the year to date for what we have, and then we do projections for where we're going to be at the end of the year, and that's how we come up with our budget.
Okay, great. Oh, that's terrific. So again, let me just clarify very quickly my 3 questions, which would be answered, I think, if we had 2 additional pieces of information available, financial pages available as part of the package. First, as I just mentioned, was did we meet our budget goals for 21-22 as forecasted, and did we go over budget, and if so, by how much? Or are we planning to go over budget, and if so, by how much? Question number 2 revolves around how much did our new budgets increase for the upcoming 22-23 fiscal year? Slightly different. One question focuses on the current year. One question focuses really on how the current year compares to the new upcoming year. And then lastly, how much will our total revenue reserve expenses, how much did they increase this year? We know what they were budgeted for last year. That was already provided to us. But in the new budget, what's the difference between what it was and what it's going to be in the 22-23 timeframe? So those are basically the 3 questions that I had. But the point I really wanted to make again was that these are already available. If the 2 additional pages worth of finances, which apparently you already have, could be made public and available to everyone. We would see the variances, we would see the analytical comments that apply to those items that are increasing significantly. And I think that would go a long way to helping every resident have a much better understanding of the budget, both this year and next year.
Yeah.
That's really the message I wanted to drive home.
No, I really appreciate that, Bob. And to be completely honest with you, I don't have the exact percentages in front of me. Do you happen to know the exact percentages? I might have to get back to you on that in an email, if you don't mind, about what the actual percentage increase was from last year's budget to next year's. And then I can certainly, as the board, can address if they would like to add that column in for next year's budget so that it's a little easier to see what the projected year end is going to be, as opposed to what the new budget is going to be.
In fact, with that in mind, I mean, I would volunteer myself to work with anyone on the trustees, work with you, Alex, to prototype a report or 2 pages, additional pages to add to the package that I think would accommodate, take it just one little step further that would provide a lot more information. So I want to volunteer to do that if that would be helpful to the team. So we can kind of maybe move that forward, not only for this year, but carry it forward to upcoming years as well.
Well, I really appreciate that, Bob. Certainly, if we need the help, we'll absolutely reach out to you. I am, if you are okay with your questions that you asked, Bill had his hand up, and then Andy Kadak had actually messaged me. So I'm going to go to Bill next, and then Andy, you'll be up on deck. Is that okay?
Sounds
Thank
good.
you very much, Bob. All right, Bill, if you want to unmute yourself there and go ahead.
Do have,
There you go.
the spreadsheet that we were using to project everything for, the coming budget and stuff like that. It has like 4 or 5 years worth of data in it, has projection where we're going to be at the end of this year. That way we could do it, better job of budgeting for next year type thing. And we used that during the process with Alex getting the budget all set. I can send you a copy of that if you want. In that way, I mean, I've worked on budgets, for a while too, and, but it's good to have somebody else's perspective from it, just to see. Yeah, that's the report there.
Mine's not on right now, so that's the report.
Yeah, so it has, a bunch of the different things. What it doesn't really have is some of the explanations of, why something went over or something like that. But that's, I mean, that can be easily added to it.
That would be great. I'd be happy to work with you on that, Bill.
Mhm.
That looks great. Thank you.
Yeah, that, I mean, because working with, I mean, I've done it for like 30 years, and it's like just having that information, and it's something that I believe, Andy, who's going to talk next, he was requesting stuff like that too. And it's something that, it's taken time to develop and get it into into the budgeting process.
Looks great. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
So I'll mute.
Bill muted himself. All right. So Andy, I know you sent me that message. So if you wanted to unmute yourself and you had some questions you wanted to ask, go right ahead.
Could you put Bill's screen up again? Because that'll.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Give me 1 second.
Because Bill, that was what Bob was talking about, and Bill prepared that at my request, and I think everybody should have it. But if you look at that one, you can see the actual projections versus the budget requests. They're significantly different, in the maintenance fee category, for example. And that's kind of what I highlighted. And I'm saying, now we'll be able to see what is the reason for that. Well, that's the income, of course, but then you go down to the expenses and you start asking the same questions. So that, as I said, I'm supporting Bill, Bob, I'm sorry, completely on that score. But my questions really have to deal with the reserve. I had an opportunity to review the original reserve study, and what caught my eye, and I'm sure it caught the trustees' eyes, were the proposed increase in assessments from 12,000 to 25,000 to 34,000 to 42,000 and to 51,000 by year. Every year that would go up huge numbers, and in later years it would be 80,000 a year. And I'm saying to myself, that just doesn't make any sense. And I just found the revised one, which isn't as bad, but still pretty bad. And the other assumption that they make is the interest earned on the reserves is 2.7%. We haven't gotten anywhere near that as an actual interest rate, interest earning. And so there's something fundamentally wrong in terms of what needs to be done and how to fund it. I appreciate completely the idea of a reserve, but not at the expense of the current people who live here. I mean, if you look at the demographics here, we're probably all over 55 legally. And none of us, I don't believe, are planning to live for 30 years more. Some may, wonderful. But the options that were proposed in that reserve study were, as I guess a gentleman said, you can borrow for extraordinary capital expenses. Yes, it might cost more, but what good is putting all this money into an account that earns nothing? Okay, earns zero. And that to me is a waste of money. So I think the board and the trustees need to reconsider the options available rather than just beefing up this trust fund, reserve fund, and then just letting it lose money with inflation. So that's my comment, and I hope we can have a chance to talk about it again. I'm sorry, I didn't video me because there I am. Hey, so that's really what I'm concerned about, is how we're going to manage the future relative to the capital expenditures, and whether in fact taking a loan or borrowing for extraordinary expenses may be a better option than just putting money in the bank and having it lose money with no interest earned. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
So Andy, let me see if I can help add a little bit to your comments, and they're great comments, and certainly similar comments have been made at various communities. You know, the difficulty in general is, you know, predicting the future, right? You know, interest rates are at an all-time low, but there was a time that, you know, they were at an all-time high of, you know, 10, 15, you know, so on percentage. And borrowing under those circumstances, when you're forced to do so, may not have been prudent at the time. And, you know, for many communities right now, borrowing money instead of using the physical cash in the bank that they have has been a great option. And a lot of those communities have looked at that and weighed the benefits, the pros and cons, you know, to the community and what was the right position. As far as reserve studies go, you know, they set a baseline, and you're absolutely right. You know, some of the numbers start to get a little scary and start to look as you go years, you know, 5, 10, 15 years out and say, wow, look at the amount of money we're going to have to contribute annually. And I think the biggest thing that I can recommend to any community is it's not set in stone. The life expectancy of some of those products and you know, elements of the community may last longer. Some may have a shorter life expectancy than you anticipate. And having funds available, you're able to adjust accordingly. Now, if you can continue to properly and proactively maintain the assets of the community, you're going to preserve those life expectancies longer. And as a result, you may not have to fully fund your reserve certain years. You may decide there's years you can't fully fund. You may decide that the funds level off or interest rates start to rise, and you can invest in low risk CDs or CDARs or government bonds and things, but you can't get into high risk investments and yields, you know, because as a result of it being community money, you can't gamble it. You know, as an individual, certainly we can make decisions, and if they work to our benefit or they don't, you know, so be it, that's our own decision. So you are a little bit limited as to what types of investment you can do to earn interest. And I certainly understand what you're saying is why tie up funds that aren't needed for today, but you need to have them available as they go. And I think each year, this tool is another tool, just as Bob and Bill and yourself were talking about a moment ago, all tools that we can use each year annually to determine what is the right level of monthly fees and annual fees for the association. And that's another thing that we can look at to say, okay, what is the actual amount we have in reserves right now? What was anticipated to already have been spent? Did we spend it? Did we not need to spend it? Do we need to increase? Can we level fund? So those are things that are going to come up every year, year after year, and every community faces those. So to your points and great points is that don't look at it as this year is 18, next year's 25, and then it's 30 and 50 and 100 and so on, or whatever it is, because it may not be the case. But the key is to use that tool to say, what are the things that are coming up? Annually look at those things, look at the conditions, how long do we think they're still going to last, and then make adjustments accordingly. So I think you do present a good and cautious approach in that we really do want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration when doing the budget on an annual basis.
I don't disagree, as I said, with the concept of reserves, but we need to think carefully about what we're doing with the money, okay? If we see within a 5-year planning horizon, there are certain things that have to be done, obviously, within the 5 years. I mean, if you look at that report, they said this may or may not fail. We don't know the life expectancy. Some of them are sort of guessing, well, this thing is going to be done in a year. I mean, who are they to be such experts on our systems that they probably didn't even understand and say, you got to replace this and that? I would leave it to our trustees or the people who work on it, like Ralph, who knows what certain things have to be done, and then legitimately decide how much money do we need to put away for that particular expense. That report listed lovely pictures, listed all these problems, like the post office has to be repaired or replaced. Well, the roof has to be replaced of the building, but no number associated with that replacement, except in a microcosm table that you have to study to figure out what they're thinking about spending and when. So the report is very not, it's not very easy to understand and trust, because the life expectancy assumptions were just not there. And particularly the investment earnings were just completely wrong.
So Andy, I just do want to touch on one thing, is just so you do know a little more understanding of how the process went. So they are an engineering company, so they deal with these particular things kind of on a daily basis on the life expectancy of these specific areas. But on top of that, we did have the trustees and also the volunteers that maintain these systems and work with them day to day also meet with the engineer that did the reserve study so that he could get a better understanding of how long of a livelihood that this system might have left in it. Do we feel like it actually, the life expectancy to the engineer might be 5 years, but the volunteer says, I think we maybe get 8 years out of it. And they take those things into consideration when they're putting the final reserve study together. So it's not just like a arbitrary number that necessarily comes from a computer. There are a lot of factors that go into it. So I just wanted to let you know that there were other people and input that went into where those numbers came from.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yep. Let me just switch the microphone for you.
I'll turn myself off.
Thank you, Andy.
I just wanted to mention to Andy that we didn't increase contributions to the extent that the study recommended. We actually looked at the numbers as you said and went, oh my God. So basically we stepped back a bit and say, hey, we're going to take a year to really examine our options and figure out in more detail what it is we have to do and how to go about it. And so we did not raise the rates as the study recommended. We modified them. Also, I'd like to point out that just so that other people may not know this, but our governing documents forbid us to invest the money. We cannot go into mutual funds. We cannot go into the stock market. We're not allowed to do that. And the best we can do is go to a bank and go to a bank products. So, CDs aren't paying any money, but that's what we can do, or a bank money market. That's the extent to what we can invest. And we've been looking at this for like 5 years, and we simply can't do it. We're not allowed. So we're limited as to that interest that we can earn. Another thing is that when you look at the report, the biggest item in there is the eventual replacement of the roads. And we simply don't, the money is astronomical to do a real job of digging up the roads, pulling in the engineers, fixing it entirely. So at this point, we're not even sure exactly how we're going to do that. And that's another thing we said, well, let's put this all aside right now, and over the next year, we're just going to, meet and try to discuss this and try to figure out what it is that we could do. And so again, we didn't do exactly as the report told us. We were trying to be fair for everyone in the future too. So just so that you know that, and as I said, we cannot invest our money. The best we can do is go out and get a CD. And Andy, you're aware of that because we took your suggestion earlier this year and went running out to Navigant to invest some money. Mandy and I drove out there and we put them as soon as you told us that it was available. But those opportunities are few and far between.
Which is exactly why the 2.7% is way off.
Okay.
Projection, I mean, extrapolated over 30 years, one never knows. It could be years of, higher interest rates, that you return. It could be years of much lower. So I don't know how they come up with the number. I don't really, it's tough to project that over a 30 year. But I agree. I mean, it's a shot at a number.
Does that answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Thank you. So looks like Andy was the last person that messaged me and I don't see any other hands raised. Are there any other questions? Oh, Bob wants to ask another question again. So go ahead, Bob, you can unmute yourself. Bob, you're still muted. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay, there you go. I must have double clicked, sorry. Yeah, I think the point that Andy brought up regarding the concern about the reserves and then the subsequent feedback that everyone else gave, Kevin gave, and so forth, is right on. The only question I have, I guess, is that every single condominium community in the world, in the United States, must be dealing with the same issue. I mean, reserves are common to everyone, every association from Florida to Massachusetts. So, I guess my question is, have we done our due diligence, or are we about to do that due diligence over the next year or so to find out what other communities are doing to maximize, their reserves, and what's tactics and what strategies can we use so that we don't front end load, the reserves, or back end load the reserves, but we have some way of doing it that others have already come before us and have found make much better sense.
What we're going to do is we're going to put together a committee and invite other people of the community into it, try to figure out what our options are for what to do about the reserves, because we are obligated to at least try to figure out how we're going to pay for the roads and anything else in the future that we need. So we are going to put together a committee. Would you like to be on it?
Yeah, if I can reach my mute button. Yeah, I would certainly like to assist in any way I can.
Okay.
The follow-up question I have, as it occurred to me, was your comment, Kevin, about the fact that the roads are our biggest concern. The community's only been around for 15 years. So this may be a legal question, but my God, roads should last a lot longer than 15 years. These roads were designed, they were implemented, they were approved by the building inspectors or by the powers to be. And my question is, are we talking a premature degradation of our roads prematurely?
We're already into it about 15 years right now already. The roads have already been here 15 years. So it's not 15 years from here. We're already there at that point. So when you say 30 years, that's only another 15 years away. Keep that in mind of the time frame that we're dealing with here. And
there is no design issue per se with the roads, because I lived in Swansea for 45 years, and in my circle, if you will, similar to Judith Ann's circle and the other circles, we hadn't replaced those roads in 45 years, and they don't need to be replaced for another 15 to 20 years. So it raises the question of, my God, we've only been here for 15 years. And if the red flags are starting to come up, or the yellow flags are starting to come up, that we may have to replace these roads sooner rather than later. Is that just a design issue?
It's well, when these roads were originally created, how can I say this? They were not properly built. The catch basins were not properly built. The roads weren't built the way that they were supposed to be. So, we're struggling to maintain them, but we are doing that. In fact, you're going to see people here come springtime. We've already agreed with a company to come in here. They're going to fill the cracks. They're going to take care of some of the areas around the catch basins. They're going to do whatever work that we need to do to keep these roads going as long as we can. And in fact, we have walked the property, and if you go out and look at the circles are pretty good. But unfortunately, when you get to like Samantha in particular and to Deborah Ann, where there was a lot of traffic, before your time, Bob, Samantha was the main route for all the construction trucks that were coming up and down. So there has been some damage over the years. And so those are the areas that we're going to be focusing on. Try to maintain it, we'll try to keep them as best we can for as long as we can to avoid this. So whether it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I don't know, but we're going to try to keep them as best we can to avoid this. Also, I think in the reserve study, there was something originally where they were saying, well, in 15 years, you're going to have to do an overlay. But then in 30 years, you were going to have to do a total replacement. So there were two iterations of that there, and we kind of moved things around a bit. So that's another thing that we put aside. We said, hey, listen, we can't deal with this right now. We need some time to think about this, understand what our options are, figure out how to pay for it, and what the time frame really is. So that's the roads we really did put into this other bucket, and it's kind of like to be figured out.
Evan, can I just throw in something else? What about trying to get the town to take it over? I mean, we talked about this several times, and I think if in the big expense, we might think about making a larger effort to try to get the town to take these roads over, because we do pay a lot of taxes and we get nothing out of it.
I agree with you. We can discuss that too and see what our other options are. Next. Anybody else with their hand up?
I don't see anybody else with their hand up, but maybe you just, not sure how to use the feature. All right, I see somebody with their actual hand up. So Steve, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, go right ahead. And then Beth, I see you will be next.
Okay. Yeah, I have been trying to send a message in response to
I'm sorry.
Andy's points, and I'm having difficulty putting it up on the post so that people can see that. But my point is this, that we have wrestled with this reserve issue. We've sort of ignored it since the time that Hort was initially started. And so now, in the last few years, with the pressure of some of us on the board has gone out and secured an independent company to assess the nature of our reserves. And so they've given us a report. The board has assessed that. They've made some decisions which are necessary for the board to do. And they're now sharing that with us in incredible detail, for which I am very thankful. Now, the question is, if some of us who have been involved with other condominium associations understand the issue of reserves and how it's dealt with in different matters. But the fundamental issue is that the board has the responsibility for assessing what is appropriate for addition to the board and what level those will be at. And I think that the board has, to their confidence, has really taken this on quite seriously and has talked with the people who have provided the reserve analysis and have made some adjustments in that. And so now all of a sudden we're being presented with the realities of what it would cost. Now, let's talk about the issue of, well, if I'm only going to be here at Horton for 2 or 3 or 5 years, and I'm going to move on, and I don't particularly want to add to the reserve because that comes out of my pocket. The question also is, how do we keep Horton Estates alive over a period of time with the proper reserve requirements? And I think this debate and discussion is very, very helpful. And I commend the board for bringing it up and letting us to engage in this conversation. That's my comment.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Anyone else? Did you say? Okay.
All right, I think, so Steve, thank you very much. If you are all set, if you don't mind just muting yourself again for interference. I can do it if you can.
You're muted again.
Okay, that's all right.
I'll go ahead, I'll mute it for you. All right, and then Beth, Kendrick, I see your hands up. So do you know how to unmute? If not, I can ask you to unmute. Let me ask you. So it should ask you, and you should be able to click yes and then speak.
Yeah.
There we go.
You're hearing me now?
We hear you now.
Okay. On the roads, it is a big problem. And our best hope is that the town will take them over. However, the only way that's going to happen, and a group of us went to the town and talked with the administrator early on. And basically he was saying, get yourself involved in the town, get people in town to know you, to know that you care about the town, that you're active in the town, you know, whatever it takes to get involved. And then when the time comes that we feel we can push for it, there's some awareness of who we are, what we've done for the town. And frankly, that just makes more sense than anything else. I don't see how we can possibly put new roads in here. I don't think they were done right to begin with. And we're just going to keep struggling with them. The other item that I noticed on the list, and I have a different reason for questioning it, is the $3,000 for mosquito control. I've questioned this from the beginning. The town doesn't do this. Towns around us don't often do it. I'm concerned about the effect it has on our environment. I know they say it's safe. You know, I'm concerned about the bees, which are a problem these days. They're saying it's safe, and yet they're telling us to close our windows and keep our animals in. Well, we wouldn't have to do that if it's safe. So that's all I'm going to say about it. I just question spending $3,000 every year for this. So you can
I'll take it.
Oh, you can mute me.
That's okay. I'm
Thank
just
you,
gonna
Beth.
switch it over to, all right.
We've, whether or not you're aware of this, several residents here came down with Lyme disease over the last 2 or 3 years. And they've actually petitioned us to keep spraying for ticks and mosquitoes. So we actually, at one of our meetings in October, we had the trustee meeting here in the clubhouse, and a couple of residents brought that up. They said they wanted to see it continue because we are a mature community, and you know we're vulnerable to this, and they asked us to continue. So most of the feedback that we have received so far is to keep it going. Now, originally we were having 7 treatments, and then we cut it down to 5 treatments. This year we're struggling for money. We're struggling with all of these changes, so we left $3,000 in there for an exterminator. I have no idea when we're going to put those treatments in. You know, we're working on that. Jerry and I have been talking about when's best to do that. But we left that in there for that reason. There are a lot of residents who live around the perimeter of the property, and they're the ones most exposed. They're close to the woods. We already know the deer come out at night. They're here all the time knocking things over. So, I mean, there's a fair amount of ticks in this area, and we're trying to keep other people safe. So this is a safety feature. We're doing this to try to prevent the spread of illness within the community. And that's why we're doing it. And I hope we can keep it going.
Thank you, Beth, for the questions, and then thank you, Kevin, for explaining. Any other questions that we have? Anybody else have any questions they'd like to address? You can use the raise hand feature, the chat feature, or if nothing else works, just raise your hand if you have your video on.
Alex, the only other thing.
Give me 1 second, let me switch the speaker for you.
The only other thing I'd say is that the roads, the reserves, what we have to do going forward is, it's going to be a major effort to understand and to implement. If we could go to the town, if we do anything at all, it's going to take a lot of time to do. It has to be planned. And we need help doing it. The five of us work very hard to keep this place going, and at times we're stressed out. So, I mean, we really do need people who are willing to get involved in that aspect and to help us, you know, not just to tell us what to do, not just to complain, but actually to come forward and help, you know, work with the team, work with us on this project. So, you know, if you're out there and you're willing to do it, you know, you're welcome to contact us, and we'll welcome you in.
All right, well, if nobody has any more questions, we could go ahead and, oh, I'm sorry, it looks like Andy had sent a chat. I don't know if everybody can see the chat, so I'll just read it for everybody. Andy Kadak had said, I think the board is doing their best in managing the reserve issue. The argument Mercantile made about increasing value of property if the reserve is well-funded is a two-edged sword. If you add up all the charges from the condo fees, water fees, it amounts to quite a large monthly bill that will deter people from buying here, lowering property values. Did you want to speak to that, Ryan? Or?
I mean, there's an argument to be, yeah, there's an argument to be made both ways, you know? Unfortunately, I don't have that crystal ball, but you know, each of us picks out the real estate and the assets in our lives based on, you know, various things, and some is the monthly fee the right and adequate for me? Is the reserve fund right and adequate for me? So you're absolutely right. That decision will be made by each individual as they purchase. So.
Thank you. All right. If there are no other questions, I think we'll probably move to adjourn the meeting, but I think on behalf of the board and everybody here, thank you. A lot of great questions, and hopefully we were able to answer a lot of your questions for you tonight. And certainly if there are additional questions that you would like to ask or need answered, feel free to reach out to myself at the office, and I'm more than happy to get those answers for you. And I also want to say a big thank you to Jerry, because we have a very great command center going on here with all the different audio and video equipment. So super appreciate that, to make sure that we were, you know, able to to get everybody's questions answered. All right, perfect. Well, it looks like we are going to come to the end of our meeting then, and I appreciate it. It was good to see some of your faces tonight, but thank you very much. And thank all of our
We appreciate it.
board members here. All right, I am going to end the meeting then. Have a great night, guys.